So, welcome to this podcast being recorded as part of the Centre for Social Work Research and Innovation at the University of Sussex, where we're this year having conversations with colleagues all over the world, actually, around issues of decolonisation and race. My name is Gillian Ruch. I'm Professor of Social Work at the University of Sussex.
And I'm Victoria Forson. I'm a children's guardian and a family court advisor from CAFCAS.
So Victoria and I are here today to have a conversation about how we engage with conversations about race in our respective workspaces and in relationship with other people. And it came out of an event that Victoria and I were part of last year. So if I give a bit of context to this, and then Victoria and I are going to get into a conversation about what our thoughts have been since that encounter. And what happened was I was presenting at an event where I was making reference to issues of equality and diversity and inclusivity. And in that event, it was at the point where the Black Lives Matter movement was really to the fore. And on my slide, I referred to Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And following this, saying this in the PowerPoint presentation, there was a conversation in the chat then, which Victoria contributed to, or I think maybe have even started, saying that actually referring to All Lives Matter was something that she found offensive. And other people joined the chat, and I realised I'd done something that had offended people and had not been sensitive to this issue that we need to be saying Black Lives Matter because they haven't mattered as much as other people's lives. And it didn't mean that all lives didn't matter, but we need to be giving more attention to the fact that Black lives seem to have mattered less to people. So that was part of the conversation that Victoria and I had after the event. But actually the bit we wanted to draw your attention to today and think a bit about more together was that my experience of Victoria actually came onto the microphone in the event and expressed in strong terms how offended she was by the statement I had made. My interpretation of Victoria's intervention at that point was that I experienced it as aggressive. And I came away from that situation, as I'm sure Victoria did, quite stirred up by what had happened. So I then felt strongly it was my responsibility to get in touch with Victoria, to continue this conversation, to understand where I'd done something offensive, and to understand better the perspective that Victoria had on it. So Victoria and I then had a conversation subsequently online with a colleague from CAFCAS joining us. And what I really learned in that conversation was something about how what I had experienced as aggressive was something that Victoria felt passionately about. And it's that bit of our encounter that we want to think about today, how we understand how views are expressed and how we experience them. So I'm going to stop there and just invite Victoria to sort of, respond to what I've said, and we'll start the conversation.
Yeah, Gillian, thank you. And I think what surprised me was how you made contact with me afterwards, because it is not always easy for someone that you've challenged to actually want to come back, address it, and see where we go from there. And I think that's quite admirable of you to have done that. And I think in the past, when, as a Black woman, when you've challenged anything that you feel is not right, you don't get that kind of response. So, and saying that now, I'm getting goosebumps. So as a Black woman, I think what you did also validated for me that, look, I want to hear your voice and I want to understand you better. And I've not always found that in establishments or universities or, as a student, as a worker, as a social worker. And so I want to thank you for that, because I think that was really admirable that you did that. I think moving on to our conversation then, I found that you were willing to listen, you were humble and ready to learn. You're ready to learn about, Black women's experiences, and you were ready to learn about, why I reacted in that manner, and you're ready to carry on that conversation, actually take something out of it and do something with it. And that is why we're here today. And for me, I think talking about your topic this year, decolonization and all that, something that I'm quite passionate about, being from Ghana, where we were colonized by the British before I moved to the UK when I was 12. And so, I'm sure you've seen television programs last year about, people that were Black people that were colonized, or countries that were colonized, and the feelings we had. And so, as a Ghanaian child living in Ghana, we had this vision, or we had this idea that, Britain was almost like a second home, and we were proud of it, proud of the Queen, proud of everything British. Our first language is English. We weren't even allowed to speak our own language at school. You were caned if you spoke a different language to English at school, because we revered the English and, the British Empire. To then move from Ghana to the UK at the age of 12, to find that the people that you hold in high esteem, they don't even value you. They don't like your color. They don't like your hair. They don't like the accent you come with. And it was a massive shock, because to hold someone in such high esteem, and for them to hold you in such low level, you are the lowest of the lowest, and you are not accepted, you are not wanted. It takes a while to get used to that. And so as you move on as a 12-year-old, to finish secondary school, go through a lot of racism, to then go to sixth form, fairly okay, university, and as a confident Black woman, I'm ever so passionate about, not just the relationship to have with the British Empire, but actually how do we bridge the fact that, yeah, you did colonize us, yes, there are issues, but we're here now, let's deal with it. And so the passion is around everything that I've been through since I've been in the UK, the racism, and yes, some very good relationships as well. But you can't forget the racism. You can't let go of how, little we feel, how unwanted we feel being here. And then at the same time, you're contributing positively to society, because I've worked since I was 14, doing paper rounds, working in restaurants, working in call centers when I was at university, and then becoming a social worker, becoming a CAFCAS officer. So you think, I'm contributing to this society. I have a right, I have a voice. I should have a voice. And so the passion really, Gillian, comes from everything we've been through, everything we've experienced, all those times when I didn't have a voice, all the times nobody wanted to listen to me, to now where actually I am a professional. I do have a voice. If I'm being heard in the High Court as a family court advisor, then when things are going wrong, I do have to challenge within a training, what have you. So that's where it came from, Gillian. That everything that I've been through.
That is really interesting. I mean, we didn't talk quite like that when we met before, and that it makes it even more powerful for me, because what I'm hearing you say is that every time something happens, there's a trigger for all those other hurts over history, both your own and your kind of countries, so all the people that you recognise from your own background. And I think when we spoke, you used the word passion. I think it may have been either you or your colleague described what I referred to as aggressive as passionate and indignant. I think they were the words, and I thought they were such good words.
Yes.
Because, if I'm passionate about something, I think too, I could come over as aggressive. I could be misunderstood as aggressive if I really put myself into it.
Yes.
And when you're talking about things that really touch the essence of who you are, then of course, any of us should be passionate if that's the case.
Yes.
So that really strikes me. And I remember too when we were speaking before, and this speaks to this as well. I think two things you said. One is that you have teenage daughters,
Yes.
and that for you, some of the, well, it contributes to your indignance, I imagine, but your passion and your sadness, that they have very similar experiences to those that you did. Not altogether, but things have not shifted as significantly as you might have liked. There's that issue. And the other one was that you said just that morning you had dropped your children off at school.
Yeah.
And somebody had taken exception to where you parked and made a racist remark to you.
Yeah.
And, you said that's the sort of thing, on a daily basis, not just these moments when, who you are is attacked.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's not like I'm living in a very small village that's not diverse. I live in Leicester, one of the most multicultural cities in the UK. Yet, I face it on a daily basis. And it is sad. Whereas I've been to other places, for instance, in New York, where actually, and Boston and what have you, and walking in the streets of New York and Boston, actually didn't remember what color I was, whether I was green, yellow, or pink.
Right.
But every day in Leicester, I am reminded that I am Black and I'm not wanted.
My goodness, that's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And I think it is the undertone way that it is done in the UK. It isn't in your face all the time. Especially in big organizations and big establishments. It's not in your face all the time, but it is there. It is there. And I think it does affect you as the years go on. And for me, naturally, I speak, we're from a culture as well, where a bit like the Italian, where actually we wear our hearts on our sleeves a bit.
Right.
Yes. So in terms of how we speak, you walked into my family home back in Ghana, it's loud, and whereas, the British are more conservative and, it's a different kind of culture. And it's about understanding that actually you may be quiet, but we're not, because culturally we are very loud. And actually, someone like me, I'm very confident. I do speak out. And I've grown up, in watching and admiring strong Black women that speak out. And so you will not find me not speaking out, whether people take it in the wrong way or not. But I think as the years go on, you realize that am I being effective if I'm seen as aggressive? But I think that is where, Gillian, you were able to overlook that. Whether it's aggression or not, you were able to overlook it and actually, get in touch with me. And I really appreciate it. And I think it's honorable of you.
And of course that I'm really moved by that. And, I feel all goosebumpy and sort of, just really touched. But of course, the danger of that from the white, supremacy kind of perspective, I don't like that language particularly, just from our superior position, is I can think, oh, well, good, I've done my work then, and I can think, no need to worry anymore. Whereas, much as you encounter these experiences, we know they get called microaggressions, but sometimes that doesn't deliver, I think, the sense of the hurt that actually, these hurts every day that you have, as we say, often in quite subtle ways that you not realise till afterwards what it represented, but you felt it.
Yeah.
I think I have to think of an equivalence that I am the other way on, at risk of creating hurts that I could be on a daily basis, actually administering hurts, not always aware of it. So I've got to keep asking myself, how am I doing this when I'm working with Black colleagues? At the moment, what I'm trying to work out is what language to use, and a label. I don't want to label, but just the other day I was talking with somebody and I said to them, I wonder, how do you identify yourself? If I refer to you as a person of colour, is that okay? And then I think I'm not happy with that, because
No.
that means they're a person of colour in relation to me who's apparently not, but therefore I'm the defining space, much like often in relation to the white person. So I don't know what thoughts you've got about that, because it's trying to keep myself open to always not assuming or just being politically correct, but actually it's not politically right.
Yeah. I think it's about what you did there, asking and leaving it open for the person to address. So, for instance, I'm a proud Black African woman. And I will say this to you: you are not the only person that gets it wrong. I also get it wrong sometimes. So, for instance, I've worked with Caribbean women, and I'm used to saying Afro-Caribbean, but you've got Caribbean women or people that will say to you, I'm not Afro-Caribbean, I'm just Caribbean.
Yeah.
And I've had that from a colleague who is upset when we use Afro-Caribbean, because for her, what comes to mind when I say Afro-Caribbean is actually, you disowned us when you sold us as slaves.
Right.
So do not attach your African to my Caribbean.
Right.
Because you sold us out during the slave trade. And she's also very passionate about that. Yeah. And so I had to correct myself and just use Caribbean, because for her.
So it makes me think we just cannot reduce anything down to a group level, because what you're saying, and we know this, but we still do it because we all thought when we had the BAME word, that does the job for us. And then, of course, that's now got unpicked really helpfully, because lots of people say, no, I don't want to be in that big, massive category. You've then given another example, slightly smaller, but the same issue. So I guess it is, always going back to asking somebody, how would I refer to you? And maybe also saying how we refer to ourselves. So not just making you the other person who needs to self-define.
Yeah.
I see myself as a white British woman. So I'm wondering how you see yourself. And then everybody's doing it.
Yes.
But it strikes me, what it reminds me of is often when students submit assignments that have some material from practice, not always, we're still not good enough at it. They don't give the ethnicity at all. I think it's got better, but often then what you see is if the family is Black or from a minority group, they get identified. But if they're white, it's just taken as read, and they don't. So far less often are students putting, this white British family. Yeah. Even though they might be good at putting, Black or Asian or whatever. So it's always, I think, having to say, we need to sit alongside everybody else. We're no different too. We're not better than. No. We've all got to do this work of identifying in a multicultural, multi-ethnic space.
Yeah. And having said that, you've got the Americans, the Black Americans, that have moved on from slavery and actually are not blaming the Africans, because they could tell that potentially was the manipulation that went on, that the slaves were taken. And so the Black Americans proudly will say, I am Afro Black American, and they're proud of their African roots. And so they will not just be called Black American. You've got loads of Afro Americans that are now moving to go and live in Africa, because they want to search and research into their roots and have been able to reconcile with that history better. And I find, some of my Caribbean sisters here in the UK, where I think they're still struggling sometimes with the idea of, the slave trade and everything that went on in the West African region around that time. Wow. So very different. You meet an American and, they are happily wearing their African outfits and what have you, and are proud to be Afro-American. And the contrast here is huge. Really, really huge.
Yeah. So we're going to have to begin to probably bring this conversation to a close, because I think what I hope we've done is sparked people's thoughts about their own position and what they I feel like I could talk for a lot longer, and I know we've got plans to do some other things perhaps together. So, hopefully that will be a space for it.
Yes.
But if we both thought about something that we think anybody listening to this might be able to take on board in terms of their own position, whatever colour they are, what do we think what would be our message to them, do you think, in terms of how we can contribute to breaking down these divides, these oppressions?
I think for me, it's about, actually, let's be realistic. Let's not be scared to get it wrong.
Yeah.
But it's about, for us to be able to hold conversations, be bold enough to hold conversations where even if we get it wrong, we can correct ourselves and then move on to have further conversations like we have done. So, you went out there to talk about a topic, Black Lives Matter, that, was very, very good. You had a slip up, but with the challenge, we've been able to then hold further conversations, which have allowed you to learn more and actually challenge, your own thinking. I think we need to get to the point where we are not constantly fighting each other or being upset with each other if people get it wrong. Let's leave room for people to sometimes not be politically correct. Let's leave room for people to sometimes not get it right or not be sure, not be right. And then let's find time to talk, discuss, and then, get it right and then learn more from there. And that could be me also to you, because there are certain terms that I would use that perhaps you would find offensive. I did that last month where I was talking about a colleague, and I said she went as white as a sheet. That can be termed as inappropriate, And it's about realizing that, having discussions around that, and moving on. And then, and then there are other terms where people have used, such as, brass as monkeys and all those things that are now offensive. But let people slip up, and then let's address it. Let's talk about it, and then let's learn from it. I think that's what I would take from our encounter and our discussions following on from them.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really helpful. I mean, I think that's exactly what I try and do. I think the worst thing I can do is get this wrong. I think this is what I'm taking away from it, and I'll say something about what I think else we can do. Get this wrong, realize that, and do something about it. And I hope that is more politically correct than just being politically correct, but not really getting in touch with what's going on. So we can use the right language, or apparently the right language, but we're not really thinking about what our relationship to it is. So that, I think, really, really helps me, and I hope helps other people that listen to this. And I think the other thing I would say, I want to flip it also in terms of, I think too, you had the grace to meet with me, because you didn't have to meet with me and you didn't know how it would go. And in terms of sort of, power, all the power in a sense rested with me, because I was the white person. I'm the person who's got this status professor, which no doubt does things to people, even if you don't want it to. I was the person that had coordinated that event. So all the power rested with me. So I could imagine it would have been much easier for you, Victoria, to think, well, stuff her, kind of.
What you don't know, Gillian, is that my father is also a professor, a lecturer at a university in Ghana in mechanical engineering. And so your role almost doesn't scare me much, because I live with one.
Right.
I've lived with one for years. Quite a renowned professor in his field as well. So it maybe for me, that has also broken down some barriers.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, because actually, I'm not scared of my dad with his big role and big title. I see you as being in a similar field. And so I think that also bridged that fear.
Interesting. Yeah. This isn't somebody I can't talk to.
No. Yeah. And I grew up in a university area or campus where the lecturers had their own house near the campus, where I saw demonstrations, students holding demonstrations and lecturers holding demonstrations and what have you. And I think a lot of my confidence and passion and drive comes from growing up in that campus
right.
environment.
There you go. So this is why we have to be curious about each other more and more, don't we? If we keep our curiosity alive as well, then we discover all these aspects of people that fill out their humanity and their uniqueness.
Yeah.
And then we're not at risk of doing any sort of just labeling. Oh, Victoria is a black woman. That's it. You know, I don't know anything about her, but I now know her, you know. I mean, that's just not on. That's why we need to keep having conversations. And as you say, risking getting it wrong, but being able to also be confident we can recover that. And I think that's what we have tried to think about today.
Yeah.
Well, it's been another really good one. Thank you so much.
It has.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye, Gillian.